The air in the conference room was cold. Not just cold, but sterile, tasting of recycled air and quiet desperation. It was a long, mahogany table, polished to a mirror sheen. I could see my own reflection in it. A tired man with shadows under his eyes. Across from me sat Chloe, my wife. Her face was a perfect, pale mask. Next to her was Marcus Thorne. He looked bored, arrogant, like this was all just a minor inconvenience. A fly to be swatted away. 3 members of the Institute's ethics committee sat at the head of the table. They looked like statues, impassive, waiting. The silence was a weight, pressing down on all of us. I slid a small, silver USB drive across the table. It made a soft, scratching sound on the wood, the only sound in the room. Marcus smirked. And what's this? Leo, your latest masterpiece. I ignored him. I looked at the committee chair. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. I said, my voice steady, much steadier than I felt. Well, this short video, it's worth a career. I pushed the drive a little further. Maybe 2. Chloe's mask finally cracked. Just a little. A flicker of fear in her eyes. I saw it. It was a small victory. But it was enough. I watched the chairman pick up the drive, his expression unreadable, and I felt the first tremor of the earthquake I was about to unleash. But that room, that moment, it wasn't the beginning. The beginning was quieter. It was 3 months earlier, on a perfectly normal Tuesday in the heart of a Chicago autumn. The beginning smelled like graphite and old paper. It sounded like the gentle scratch of my pencil on a large sheet of vellum. My world was my studio, a small room at the back of our suburban house, overlooking a yard full of dying orange leaves. This was my sanctuary, a place where I built worlds out of lines and angles. My son, Sam, was 6 years old. He was my real world. He was building his own masterpiece on the floor beside my desk, a tower of brightly colored Legos that defy gravity. Look, Daddy, he said, his voice full of that pure, unfiltered pride only a child possesses. It's taller than your building. I smiled, leaning back in my chair. It's way better than my building. Buddy, mine doesn't have a red block for a spaceship on top. He giggled. It's for the aliens, so they can park. Of course. Alien parking. A crucial design element I always forget. I looked from his Lego tower to the drawing on my board. It was a residential skyscraper I had named the Evergreen. It was more than a building to me. It was a philosophy. A structure designed to live and breathe, with vertical gardens, a water reclamation system, and a footprint so light it practically floated. It was my answer to the cold glass and steel boxes that were choking the city. It was my heart, rendered in ink. I had been working on it in my spare time for over a year. It was my secret, my hope. Sam came over and rested his small chin on my knee, looking up at the complex drawing. Are we gonna live there? Daddy. I ran my hand through his soft, brown hair. Maybe one day. Kiddo. Or maybe a lot of families will. Families just like us. That was the dream. A simple one. To build good things. To be a good father. To have a happy home. I thought I had it. I really did. The foundation felt solid. The walls felt strong. I didn't know then that the rot had already started from the inside. The sound of the front door opening broke the quiet peace of the afternoon. Keys hitting the small glass bowl on the entry table. The sharp, distinct click of high heels on the hardwood floor. Chloe was home. Sam's face lit up. Mommy. He abandoned his tower and ran out of the studio. I could hear their exchange in the hallway. Her voice was tired, strained. The voice she always brought home from the city. The voice of her job. Hi, sweetie. Mommy's had a long day. A brief hug. Then, did you wash your hands for dinner? She walked into the studio a moment later. She was beautiful, dressed in a sharp, black pantsuit that made her look powerful and untouchable. She smelled of expensive perfume in the faint, electric scent of downtown Chicago. She kissed my cheek, but it was a fleeting, distracted gesture. Her eyes were already scanning the drawings on my wall. Still playing with your little green project? She asked. It wasn't mean. Not exactly. But it wasn't supportive either. It was dismissive. Like it was a hobby. Like my Legos. It's coming along, I said, keeping my tone light. I think I finally solved the cross-ventilation issue for the upper floors. That's nice. Leo. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at her phone, her thumb scrolling rapidly through emails. Marcus loved the presentation today. He thinks we're on the verge of landing the North Harbor contract. It's huge. Marcus. It was always Marcus. Marcus Thorne, the rockstar CEO of the architectural firm where she worked. A man with a jawline as sharp as his buildings and a reputation for being ruthless. In the beginning, I was proud of her. She was smart, ambitious. She was thriving in a cutthroat world. But lately, his name was a constant presence in her house. It was in her texts at dinner, in her late-night phone calls, in the stories she told with a little too much excitement in her eyes. That's great, Chloe, I said. And I meant it. I wanted her to succeed. I just wished her success didn't feel like it was leaving me behind. She finally looked up from her phone. Listen, I have a huge video conference call tonight. With Marcus and the international investors. Around 8. I needed to be quiet. Can you make sure Sam is settled? Of course, I said. We'll be quiet as mice. She gave me a quick, grateful smile. It was a glimpse of the woman I married, the one who could light up a room. But the glimpse was gone as fast as it came, replaced by the stressed, ambitious stranger her job was turning her into. She walked out of the studio, already dialing a number on her phone. I looked back at my drawing of the evergreen, my dream of a building that was about community, about harmony. And for the first time, it felt small. It felt naive. It felt like a Lego tower in a world of wrecking balls. Later that evening, the house was silent except for the low murmur of Chloe's voice from the living room. I had put Sam to bed, read him a story about a dragon who learned to share his treasure, and tucked him in. He was asleep in minutes, his small chest rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm. I stood in his doorway for a long moment, watching him. This was my foundation. This little boy. Everything I did was for him. I went downstairs. Chloe had her laptop set up on the dining room table. She had a glass of red wine next to her. The bottle was on the counter, already half empty. She was dressed up again, even for a video call. A silk blouse, pearl earrings. Her back was to me, but I could see the screen reflected in the dark window behind her. Marcus Thorne's face, smiling, occupied a large square. She was laughing at something he said. It was a laugh I hadn't heard in a long time. It was bright and flirtatious. It made something cold twist in my stomach. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was work. This was her career. I was supposed to be supportive. I retreated to the kitchen, making myself a cup of tea, trying to ignore the sound of her voice, trying to ignore the unease that was creeping into the quiet corners of my home, the feeling that I was becoming a guest in my own life. I sat at the kitchen island, sketching on a napkin, trying to lose myself in the familiar comfort of lines and shapes. But my mind wouldn't settle. I kept hearing her laugh. I kept seeing his face in the window. The foundation of a building is the most important part. You can't see it, but everything rests on it. If it cracks, even a little, the whole structure is compromised. It might not fall right away. It might stand for years, looking strong and stable from the outside. But the weakness is there, a hidden flaw, waiting for the right amount of pressure, the right storm, to bring it all down. That night, listening to my wife charm a man who wasn't me, I felt the first hairline crack form in the foundation of my world. I didn't know it yet, but the storm was coming, and I was standing right in its path. In our past, I heard Chloe's voice rise in excitement. The sharp, clear tone she used when she was closing a deal. Absolutely. Marcus, the vision is entirely yours. I'm just helping to execute it. Yes, I'll have the preliminary model sent over by morning. The vision is entirely yours. The words hung in the air, seeming to drift into the kitchen. Something about them felt wrong. Dishonest. But I pushed the thought away. I was tired. I was being paranoid. I decided to go up to bed. I walked quietly through the dining room, not wanting to disturb her. She was wrapping up the call. Thank you again, Marcus, for everything. Tonight was perfect. She smiled into the camera. A wide, dazzling smile. Talk to you tomorrow. She closed the laptop with a satisfied sigh and took a long drink from her wine glass. She didn't notice me standing in the doorway. She stared out the dark window, at her own reflection. And in that unguarded moment, I saw her expression. It wasn't just happiness. It was triumph. The look of someone who had just won something big. She finally saw me. She jumped slightly, startled. Leo, I didn't hear you. Sorry. Didn't mean to scare you. Sounds like the call went well. It went better than well, she said, her eyes shining. This is it. This is a project that puts me on the map. I'm happy for you, Chloe. And I tried to be. I really did. But as I looked at her, flushed with wine and victory, I couldn't shake the feeling that her map and my map were leading to two very different places, and the distance between them was growing wider with every passing day. I went upstairs, leaving her alone with her success, the taste of stale tea in my mouth and a cold, heavy knot in my chest. The house had never felt so big, or so empty. The next few days passed in a haze of strained politeness. We moved around each other like strangers in a hotel, our conversations limited to household logistics. Sam has his soccer practice on Thursday. We're out of milk. I'll be working late again. The emotional distance between us was becoming a physical presence in the house, a cold draft that no closed window could stop. I kept telling myself it was just stress, the pressure of her new project. I was trying to be a good husband. I was trying to be patient. But patience feels a lot like ignorance when your gut is screaming that something is wrong. The breaking point didn't come with a dramatic confrontation. It came on a Wednesday night, with a gentle patter of rain against the windows. Chloe was preparing for another important video call. The big one. The final pitch to the overseas investors. She was a bundle of nervous energy, pacing the dining room, checking her reflection in the dark glass of the china cabinet. She had poured herself a generous glass of wine. Her second. Leo, can you please keep Sam occupied? This has to be perfect, she said, her voice tight. We're building a fort in the living room. I replied calmly. He won't make a sound. Sam and I were draped under a blanket held up by two chairs, a flashlight creating dancing shadows on the fabric ceiling. He was telling me a whispered story about a night in a friendly monster. It was a perfect, small moment of peace. From the dining room, I heard Chloe's meeting begin. Her voice shifted, becoming smooth, professional, and charming. I heard Marcus's voice through the computer speakers, deep and confident. They were a team, a well-oiled machine. I tried to focus on my son, on the warmth of our little fort, but their voices were an unwelcome intrusion. Then, it happened. A small, innocent accident. Sam, wanting to show his mom the drawing of the friendly monster, crawled out from under the blanket. He was so excited, his little feet moving too fast on the hardwood floor. He didn't see the laptop's power cord stretched across the path. He tripped. His hands flew out to catch his fall, and the plastic cup of water he was holding went flying. It arced through the air in a perfect, terrible slow motion. It landed right on the keyboard of Chloe's laptop. There was a fizz, a crackle. The screen went black. The silence that followed was absolute. It lasted for maybe 3 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Sam was on the floor, looking at the dead laptop with wide, terrified eyes. Chloe didn't scream. She didn't yell. She moved with a frightening speed. She stood up, her chair scraping violently against the floor. She strode over to where Sam was still sitting, stunned, and she slapped him. It wasn't a tap. It was a hard, sharp slap across the face. The sound was a crack, sharp and ugly, a sound that should never exist in a home. It echoed in the quiet room. Sam didn't even cry at first. He just gasped, his small hand flying to his cheek. A bright red handprint was already blooming on his pale skin. Then his face crumpled, and a heartbreaking wail tore out of him. I was frozen. My mind couldn't process what I had just seen. This was my son, my gentle, sweet boy. And Chloe, she had looked at him with such fury. Not like a mother. Like he was an obstacle, an inconvenience that had just cost her something vital. I finally moved, my legs feeling like they were wading through cement. I knelt down and pulled Sam into my arms. He buried his face in my shoulder, his small body shaking with sobs. I looked up at Chloe. She was staring at her blank laptop, her chest heaving. The smell of her wine was thick in the air. You just ruined it, she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. You ruined everything. She wasn't talking to Sam. She was talking to the universe, to the dead laptop, to the failed meeting. My son was just collateral damage. As I held my crying child, my eyes fell on Chloe's phone, which lay face up on the table. The screen lit up with a new notification. A message from Marcus. Great job tonight. Don't worry about the tech glitch. You had them hooked. Celebrate. You've earned it. The words burned into my brain. Celebrate. My son had a red mark on his face, his heart broken by his own mother, and her partner, her boss. was telling her to celebrate. In that single, sickening moment, the foundation of my life turned to sand. The slap wasn't about a spilled cup of water. It wasn't about a broken laptop. It was about protecting her meeting with him, her success with him, her world with him. And in that world, our son was disposable. I picked Sam up, his tears soaking my shirt. I carried him past his mother, who was now frantically trying to reboot the dead machine. I didn't say a word. There were no words. The sound of the slap had said it all. I took my son upstairs, rocked him back to sleep, and sat in the dark, listening to the pieces of my family fall apart. A week later, the chill in the house had become a permanent frost. Chloe had apologized. A hollow, muttered, "I'm sorry. I was just so stressed." She bought Sam a new, expensive Lego set, but she never truly looked me in the eye. She never talked about what really happened, the violence of it, the betrayal of it. She just wanted to move on, to paper over the cracks. But I couldn't. I had started to look, really look. The first piece of evidence was small. A crumpled receipt I found in the pocket of her trench coat while gathering the laundry. It was from a restaurant called the Observatory, one of those places on top of a skyscraper where a steak costs more than our weekly groceries. It was dated from 2 weeks ago. On a night she told me she was stuck at the office with the team. The receipt was for 2 people. The total was obscene. And at the bottom, a waitress had scribbled a note. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne." My hands were shaking as I held the small piece of paper. It was a lie. A clear, calculated lie. When I confronted her with it that evening, she barely flinched. "Oh, that?" she said, waving a dismissive hand. "Marcus took the whole team out to celebrate a preliminary win. He paid with his card. I must have just grabbed the wrong copy. It was plausible. It was a good lie. A month ago, I would have believed it. But now, all I could hear was the echo of that slap. All I could see was the fear in my son's eyes. I knew she was lying. I just couldn't prove it." The final, devastating blow came on a Tuesday night, almost a month to the day after the incident. Chloe came home late, well after midnight. But she wasn't tired. She was electric. Her eyes wide. Her cheeks flushed. It was the same triumphant energy from the night of her first video call, but magnified by 1,000. She dropped a heavy, black portfolio onto the dining room table. It landed with a solid thud. "This is it, Leo," she announced, her voice breathless. "This is the one. The design that will make my career. That will make us." A cold dread washed over me. I walked slowly to the table. My hands felt numb as I untied the black ribbon and opened the portfolio. Inside were a dozen large, glossy prints, architectural renderings of a skyscraper, a beautiful, revolutionary building, with cascading green terraces, a sleek, aerodynamic profile, and a unique, biophilic core. A building I knew intimately. I felt the air leave my lungs. It was the evergreen. My building. My design. My heart. My soul. My secret hope. Printed in high-definition color. Every line. Every curve. Every window placement. It was all there. My handwriting was gone, replaced by a crisp, professional font. My name was gone, replaced by a sleek logo in the corner, Thorne and Associates Architects. The name of the project wasn't the Evergreen anymore. It was printed in bold letters at the top of every page. The Apex Tower. I flipped through the pages, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. The cross-ventilation system I had struggled with for months. The precise angle of the solar panels on the roof. The pattern of the reclaimed wood on the balconies. It was a perfect, shameless copy of the drawings in my studio. The drawings she had dismissed as my little green project. I looked up at her. She was smiling, waiting for me to praise her, to congratulate her on her magnificent achievement. She didn't look guilty. She looked proud. "What do you think?" she asked, her voice bright. "Isn't it a work of art?" "Marcus says it's visionary." My heart felt like a block of ice in my chest. I stared at the woman I had married, the mother of my child, and I saw a complete stranger. A stranger who had not only betrayed me, but had stolen from me. She hadn't just taken my design. She had taken my dream, put her name on it, and was now presenting it to me as her ticket to a better life. Have you ever looked at a piece of paper and felt your whole world shatter? Have you ever realized that the happiness you thought you had was just a thin coat of paint, and it was peeling away to reveal something rotten underneath? That night, I learned that the deepest betrayals don't come from enemies. They come from the people you let into your sanctuary, the people you trust with your blueprints. The air in the room was thick with the smell of glossy paper and betrayal. I couldn't breathe. I stared at her, the prints of my stolen work lying between us like a body. My mind was a storm of questions, but only one came out. A strangled whisper. How? Chloe's smile faltered, replaced by a defensive glint in her eyes. She finally saw the look on my face. She knew that I knew. She didn't bother to deny it. She just shrugged. A small, dismissive gesture that cut deeper than any confession. Don't be so dramatic, Leo, she said, her voice turning cold. They were just sketches. Ideas. They would have sat in this room and collected dust for the next 20 years. I gave them life. You gave them life? My voice started to rise, trembling with a fury I had never felt before. You stole them. Chloe. You walked into my studio, into my private space, and you stole my work. I improved it. She shot back, crossing her arms. I took your raw, naive concepts and, with Marcus, we refined them. We made them marketable. We turned your little hobby into a billion-dollar project. You should be thanking me. Thanking her. The audacity of it punched the air out of my lungs. I felt a dizzying mix of rage and heartbreak. This wasn't just about a building. It was about trust. It was about respect. It was about the foundation of our entire life together. And she was telling me it was all just a raw, naive concept that she had improved upon. My hobby, I said, my voice dangerously low. I poured my soul into that design. It was for us, for our future. And you just handed it over to him. It's for our future now more than ever. She insisted, her voice rising to match mine. Don't you get it? This is our ticket out of this tiny suburban house, out of your dead-end freelance jobs. Marcus has connections. Leo, he has power. He can make things happen. What can you do? Draw pretty pictures that no one will ever see? Her words were meant to hurt, and they did. They were precise, cruel, and aimed at the deepest of my insecurities. She saw my passion as a weakness, my integrity as a flaw. In her eyes, I wasn't her partner. I was a dead weight she had decided to cut loose. I looked at the confident, ruthless stranger in front of me and realized the woman I loved was gone. Maybe she had been gone for a long time, and I just refused to see it. This isn't over. Chloe, I said, my voice hardening into something I barely recognized. It was cold. It was resolute. She laughed. A short, sharp, ugly sound. What are you going to do? Leo, sue me. Sue Marcus Thorne. They'll bury you in legal fees. You'll be a laughing stock. A bitter, jealous husband who couldn't handle his wife's success. She was right. I had no proof. It was my word against hers and the word of a corporate giant. Any sketches I had were just paper. No dates. No timestamps. They could easily claim I copied them. In the brutal world she now inhabited, my truth was worthless without evidence. I didn't argue anymore. I just turned and walked away. Back to my studio. I closed the door, the sound of its click sealing the end of my marriage. I sat at my drafting table, surrounded by the ghosts of my work. And for the first time in my adult life, I felt completely and utterly lost. My life's work, my love, my family, it was all a lie. A beautifully rendered, expertly designed lie. But a lie nonetheless. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, the gears in my mind turning. She thought I was weak. She thought I was naive. She thought I would just roll over and accept it. And maybe the old Leo would have. The quiet, gentle Leo who avoided conflict. But she had done more than just steal from me. She had slapped my son. She had endangered my family. And in doing so, she had awakened something in me. A cold, hard resolve. If I was going to lose everything, I wasn't going down without a fight. The next morning, I made the first call to the one person I knew I could trust. My friend, Dave. We've been friends since college. He was a brilliant, cynical IT security specialist who saw the world in code and firewalls. Hey, man, I said, my voice hoarse from lack of sleep. I need a favor. A big one. And it's off the books. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Dave's voice. Serious. How far off the books are we talking? Leo, are we talking help me install a new router off the books? Or I need a new identity and a ticket to Mexico off the books? Closer to the second one, I said grimly. I told him everything. The design. The lies. The slap. I told him about Marcus Thorne. Dave was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, all the cynicism was gone from his voice. That's not just off the books, Leo. That's a declaration of war. What do you need? Proof. I said. I need something concrete. Something that ties her and Thorne to the theft of my work. Something they can't deny. Okay. Dave said. And I could hear him typing. Her company is Thorne and Associates. Big fish. Their security will be tight. But every fortress has a back door. Let me do some digging. Don't do anything stupid. Just act normal. The most important thing right now is for them to think you're beaten. Act normal. It was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do. For the next few days, I lived in a state of suspended animation. I played with Sam. I made dinner. I exchanged hollow pleasantries with Chloe. I was an actor playing the part of myself, and it was exhausting. Chloe was distant but smug. Confident she had won. She was busy. Constantly on the phone. Planning the project launch. Talking about press releases and investor meetings. Then, the invitation came. An email. Forwarded by Chloe. You and your family are cordially invited to a private dinner, celebrating the upcoming launch of the Apex Tower. It was being held at Marcus Thorne's house. A sprawling, modern mansion on the shore of Lake Michigan. We have to go, Chloe said. Her tone leaving no room for argument. It's important to show a united front. My first instinct was to refuse. To burn the invitation. The thought of shaking that man's hand in his own home made me sick. But then Dave's words came back to me. Act normal. Let them think you're beaten. A plan began to form in my mind. A risky, terrible plan. Okay, I said. My voice flat. We'll go. The night of the dinner party was cold and clear. The city lights glittered across the dark water of the lake. Marcus Thorne's house was less a home and more a monument to his own ego. All glass and steel and sharp angles. It looked like one of his own skyscrapers laid on its side. We walked in, and it felt like stepping onto a movie set. The rooms were filled with beautiful, powerful people, all laughing and drinking champagne. Marcus greeted us at the door. He was even more charismatic in person. He shook my hand. His grip firm. His smile dazzling. Leo, so good to finally meet you properly, he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Chloe has told me so much about you. She said you're quite the creative yourself. I smiled back. A dead, empty smile. I just dabble, I said. Chloe's a real talent in the family. His eyes met mine, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of something in them. A flash of triumphant condescension. He knew exactly who I was and what they had done. And he was enjoying it. He put a hand on Chloe's back. A little too familiarly. She's more than a talent. She's a visionary. This project, the Apex Tower, it's going to change the Chicago skyline forever. And it was all her. I just stood there, nodding. The champagne in my hand tasting like acid. Chloe was glowing, soaking in the praise, introducing me to people whose names I immediately forgot. I was a prop. The supportive husband. The footnote in her success story. Sam, bless his innocent heart, was oblivious to the undercurrents of tension. He was just excited to be in a big, fancy house. He pointed at a large, abstract sculpture in the corner. Daddy, look. It's like my Lego tower. The comment was so innocent, but it hit me like a physical blow. I had to get away. Making an excuse, I slipped away from the party and found a quiet hallway. I leaned against a cold wall, trying to control my breathing. That's when I saw it. A door, slightly ajar. It led to a home office. Marcus's office. It was a stupid risk, but I had to know. I had to see something. Find something. Anything that could help me. I pushed the door open and slipped inside. My heart pounding. The room was immaculate. A massive desk faced a floor-to-ceiling window with a breathtaking view of the lake. On the desk was his laptop, open and humming. It was a long shot. It was insane. But I had to try. I pulled out my phone and quickly sent a text to Dave. I'm in his office. On his network. Can you do anything? The reply came back almost instantly. Are you crazy? Get out of there. But if you're staying, try to find a USB port. And for God's sake, don't touch the keyboard. On the side of the desk, almost hidden, was a multi-port hub. I took a deep breath and pulled a tiny, Disguised USB drive from my pocket. Dave had given it to me. It'll install a passive data sniffer. He'd explained. It won't trigger any alarms. It just sits and listens. If anything interesting passes through his network, we'll get a copy. My hand was trembling so badly I could barely hold the drive. I could hear the party. The laughter. Just down the hall. Any second. He could walk in. I leaned over the desk, pretending to admire the view, and with a movement that felt impossibly slow, I slid the drive into an empty port. It clicked softly into place. Done. I turned to leave, and then my eyes fell on a framed photograph on a side table. It was a picture of Marcus and Chloe. They were on a boat, the sun setting behind them. Chloe was laughing that bright, flirtatious laugh, her head tilted back. Marcus's arm was around her, his hand resting comfortably on her waist. They didn't look like a boss and his employee. They looked like a couple. The date was printed in the corner. It was from 2 months ago, the week before she slapped her son. The sight of it confirmed everything. All the lies, all the late nights. It wasn't just about a courier. It was about him. Suddenly, I heard footsteps approaching the office. My blood ran cold. I ducked behind a large potted plant in the corner, my heart hammering against my ribs. The door opened. It was Marcus and Chloe. They came in, laughing, and he closed the door behind them. They thought they were alone. I think your husband is starting to suspect something, Marcus said, his voice a low murmur. Chloe's laugh was brittle. Let him. He's harmless. He's an artist, not a fighter. What's he going to do? He designed a hell of a building. I'll give him that, Marcus said. He walked over to the window, standing right where my drawing had placed the central living space of the evergreen. This view will be even better from the penthouse of the Apex Tower. Our tower. Chloe corrected him, moving to stand beside him. She wrapped her arms around his waist from behind. We did it, Marcus. We're just getting started. My dear, he said, turning and pulling her into a deep, passionate kiss. I stood there, hidden in the shadows, not 10 feet away from them. I watched my wife kiss another man. I watched them celebrate their victory on the ashes of my life, and in that moment, the hurt, the sadness, it all burned away. All that was left was a cold, pure, diamond-hard rage. She was right about one thing. The old Leo wasn't a fighter, but they had just created a new one. And this one would burn their whole world to the ground. Hiding in the shadows of Marcus Thorne's office, I became a ghost, an invisible witness to my own life's demolition. The sound of their kissing was a wet, ugly sound that seemed to suck all the air out of the room. I held my breath. My muscles clenched so tight I thought they might snap. Every instinct screamed at me to step out, to confront them, to unleash the inferno raging in my chest. But Dave's voice echoed in my head. Let them think you're beaten. A public outburst would only make me look like the unhinged, jealous husband Chloe had predicted. It would be my word against theirs, and I'd be handing them the narrative on a silver platter. No. This had to be colder, more precise. In demolition, not an explosion. They finally broke apart. Chloe was breathless, her hand resting on his chest. We should get back out there, she murmured. People will notice. Let them, Marcus said, his voice thick with arrogance. He ran a hand down her arm. Soon enough, everyone will know you're with me. Once the Apex deal is fully signed and this inconvenience with your husband is settled. The word stung. Inconvenience. That's what I was. A problem to be managed. A loose end to be tied up. He'll agree to the divorce, Chloe said, a note of certainty in her voice. He'll want to avoid a fight for Sam's sake. He's predictable. Predictable. Harmless. Naive. They kept painting a picture of me that I no longer recognized. They were so confident in my weakness. They couldn't see the threat they were creating. They left the office, shutting the door behind them. I waited, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, until their footsteps and laughter faded down the hall. I crept out from my hiding place, my body stiff, my hands shaking. I pulled the USB drive from the hub, my fingers fumbling with the small device. It felt warm to the touch, as if it had absorbed the poison in that room. I slipped it into my pocket, took one last look at the office seat their stolen world and walked out, melting back into the party. I found Sam by the dessert table, his face smeared with chocolate. I grabbed him, held his hand, and found Chloe. My face was a carefully constructed mask of neutrality. Sam's getting tired, I said, my voice even. I think we should take him home. Chloe barely looked at me, her attention on a conversation with a city councilman. Fine, she said, waving a dismissive hand. You go ahead. I need to stay in network. She didn't want to leave. Of course she didn't. This was her coronation. I didn't argue. I just nodded, took my son's hand, and walked out of that house without looking back. As I buckled Sam into his car seat, he looked up at me, his eyes sleepy. Daddy, is that man going to build your building now? The innocent question was a knife in my heart. No, buddy, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. No, he's not. I promised myself in that moment. I would keep that promise, no matter what it took. The drive home was silent. The city lights blurred past the window, but I didn't see them. I saw only one thing, the image of Chloe and Marcus, framed by the window of his office. The war had begun. The next day, I went to Dave's apartment. It was a chaotic mess of computer parts, empty coffee cups, and tangled wires. It was the command center of my new life. I gave him the USB drive. You're a madman. You know that? He said. But he took the drive and plugged it into a formidable-looking tower of a computer. He typed furiously, lines of green code scrolling across a black screen. Did it work? I asked, pacing his small living room. The sniffer did its job, he said, his eyes glued to the monitor. It copied a ton of data packets. Most of it is junk. Encrypted emails. Network traffic. It'll take me days, maybe weeks, to sort through it all. He leaned back, rubbing his tired eyes. But I did get one thing. Something easy. From the unsecured guest network. It's not much, but it's a start. He turned the monitor towards me. It was a video file. He clicked play. The image was grainy, taken from a low angle. It was from the security camera in the parking garage of Chloe's office building. The timestamp in the corner was from 2 months ago. The video showed Chloe getting into the passenger seat of Marcus's sleek, black sedan. They talked for a few moments. Then, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small object. A USB drive. She handed it to him. He took it. And then he leaned over and kissed her in a passionate kiss like the one in his office. But a quick, transactional one. A kiss of conspiracy. My breath hitched. The drive. I whispered. That has to be my design on it. Almost certainly. Dave said. This is good. Leo. This is proof of a clandestine meeting. It proves they had a relationship outside of the office. It proves she gave him something. It punches a hole in their whole professional collaboration story. It was the first real piece of leverage I had. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was ammunition. I felt a surge of something that wasn't quite hope, but was close to it. It was a feeling of solid ground under my feet after weeks of drowning. What's the next step? I asked. We wait. Dave said. The sniffer is still active on his network. As long as he doesn't find that little drive you planted, it will keep feeding me data. He's arrogant. He's sloppy. He'll make a mistake. We just have to be patient and wait for him to make it. Patience was a form of torture. I moved into the guest room. Chloe didn't even seem to notice for 2 days. Our home was now just a territory we shared. A cold war fought in silent hallways and over tense family dinners with our son caught in the middle. I focused all my energy on Sam. Taking him to the park. Helping him with his homework. Trying to build a shield of normalcy around him. Meanwhile, the launch of the Apex Tower was becoming the biggest news in the Chicago architecture world. Magazine articles were written. TV interviews were scheduled. Chloe and Marcus were being hailed as a new power couple of design. Every time I saw their faces, smiling from a website or a newspaper, the cold rage inside me hardened into steel. The waiting finally paid off 3 weeks later. I got a frantic call from Dave in the middle of the night. I've got it, he said, his voice buzzing with adrenaline. I've got it. Leo, the son of a bitch. I've got him. I was at his apartment in 15 minutes. He pointed to his screen. Marcus was working late, finalizing the investor prospectus. He accessed his private cloud server. For about 5 minutes, the firewall dropped while it was sensing, and our little sniffer was listening. On the screen was a folder. It was labeled A.T. Originals. My heart started to pound. Dave clicked it open. Inside were dozens of files. Scans of my original sketches. Early digital drafts. Even photos I had taken of my physical model. Each file had metadata attached. And that metadata told a story. It showed the date and time each file was created. Dates that stretched back over a year. Dates that long predated Chloe's visionary work on the project. And then we saw the final, damning piece of evidence. It was an audio file. A voice memo. Dave clicked play. Marcus's voice filled the room. Smooth and confident. It sounded like he was dictating a note to himself. Memo to self. He said, regarding the Apex design source, Chloe Vance has delivered the complete original files from her husband. A bit raw. But the core concept is brilliant. Pure genius. We'll need to scrub the originals and rebrand everything under the Thorne & Associates banner. Have legal draft a new employment contract for Chloe, with a strict non-disclosure agreement, and a significant bonus. Contingent on the project's success. She's earned it. And we need to make sure her husband stays quiet. We stared at the screen. The audio file replaying in the silence of the room. It was everything. The theft. The conspiracy. The motive. The cover-up. It was the smoking gun. It was the truth. In his own words, I felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. The weight I had been carrying for months suddenly lifted. It's over. I whispered. Not yet. Dave said. His expression grim but determined. He started typing again. Now we load the weapon. Now we choose the time and place to fire. The perfect time and place came a week later. An invitation arrived in my email. Thorne & Associates cordially invites the press and partners to the official unveiling of the Apex Tower. It was a massive media event, to be held in the grand ballroom of a downtown hotel. It was their victory lap, their moment of triumph. It was going to be their execution. I looked at the invitation, at the elegant font and the glossy rendering of my stolen building, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. A real smile. It felt cold, sharp, and full of purpose. Okay, Chloe, I whispered to the empty room. You wanted to show a united front. Let's give them a show they'll never forget. The day of the unveiling felt charged. Electric. The autumn air was crisp and smelled of rain. But inside the grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel, the atmosphere was thick with money and anticipation. It was a sea of dark suits, glittering jewelry, and the low hum of hundreds of conversations. Waiters moved like ghosts through the crowd, balancing trays of champagne. At the front of the room, a massive LED screen glowed with the logo of the Apex Tower. It was my design, streamlined and corporatized, shining down on the people who had come to celebrate its theft. I stood at the back of the room, near one of the service entrances. Dave was a few feet away, dressed in a borrowed suit that was a little too tight in the shoulders. He looked uncomfortable, but his eyes were sharp, alert. He gave me a short, almost imperceptible nod. He had his laptop in a messenger bag, tethered to his phone. He had already hacked into the ballroom's AV system. We were ready. All I had to do was give the signal. My heart was a trip hammer against my ribs. This was it. There was no turning back. I scanned the crowd and saw them. Chloe and Marcus. They were the center of gravity in the room, holding court near the stage. Chloe was wearing a stunning, backless evening gown the color of blood. Her laugh was bright and loud, echoing across the marble floor. Marcus stood beside her, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. They looked like royalty. Triumphant. Untouchable. The sight of them, so confident in their deceit, extinguished any last flicker of doubt I might have had. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. The master of ceremonies, a local news anchor with a plastic smile, walked to the podium. He spoke in glowing terms about vision, innovation, and the future of the Chicago skyline. He built up the anticipation, his voice booming through the speakers. And now, he declared, please join me in welcoming the two visionaries behind this revolutionary project. The CEO of Thorne & Associates, Mr. Marcus Thorne, and the brilliant senior project lead, Ms. Chloe Vance. A wave of applause swept through the room as they walked onto the stage. The spotlights followed them, making Chloe's dress glitter and Marcus's teeth seem impossibly white. They smiled and waved, soaking in the adoration. They looked like they were accepting an Oscar. Marcus stepped up to the microphone. Thank you, he began, his voice smooth as velvet. Thank you all for being here to witness the birth of a new icon. He launched into a polished, charismatic speech about ambition and artistry. He talked about pushing boundaries. He talked about dreaming big. He used words like integrity and passion without a trace of irony. I felt a bitter taste rise in my throat. He gestured to the large screen behind him. The Apex Tower is more than just a building. It's a statement. It's a testament to what can be achieved when a singular, original vision is pursued with relentless dedication. That was my cue. Singular, original vision. I caught Deza across the room. I gave him the signal. A single, deliberate nod. He bent his head, his fingers moving quickly on his laptop. On stage, Marcus was hitting his crescendo. It's a design born of pure, unadulterated creativity. A concept so unique, so innovative. He was cut off. A loud electronic chirp echoed through the ballroom as a second screen, a smaller pull-down projection screen to the side of the main stage, suddenly flickered to life. It hadn't been part of the presentation. Heads turned. Confused. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. On the screen, a video began to play. The grainy, low-angle footage from the parking garage. The room fell silent. Everyone watched as the Chloe on the screen, looking furtive and conspiratorial, handed a USB drive to Marcus. They watched as he leaned in and gave her that quick, transactional kiss. The timestamp was clearly visible in the corner. The evidence of their secret dealings was now playing out, for hundreds of the most influential people in the city to see. On the stage, Marcus and Chloe had frozen. Their smiles were gone, replaced by identical masks of horror. The color drained from Marcus's face. Chloe's hand flew to her mouth. The entire ballroom was captivated. A silent, collective gasp hanging in the air. The video ended. The screen went black. But the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted in the most public way imaginable. Before the whispers could erupt into a full-blown roar, I made my move. I had a friend who worked for the hotel's AV crew. For a small fee, he had patched a single, wireless microphone into the main sound system for me. It was in my jacket pocket. I pulled it out and pressed the small button on its side. My voice, calm and clear, filled the ballroom. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. The silence was so complete that my words cut through it like a scalpel. Originality has a price, I said, stepping out from the shadows at the back of the room. And it's time to pay. Every head in the room swiveled towards me. I could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on me. I saw Chloe's gaze find mine across the crowded room. Her face was a wreck of shock and disbelief. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Real fear. Marcus recovered first. He was a performer, used to controlling a room. He grabbed the microphone from the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, please excuse the technical difficulties," he said, his voice straining to sound normal. "And I'm not sure who this gentleman is, but I can assure you that hotel security will be escorting him out shortly." His attempt to dismiss me was a mistake. It gave me my opening. "My name is Leo Vance," I said into my mic, my voice resonating with a strength I didn't know I possessed. "I'm a husband. I'm a father. And I am the original architect of the building you are calling the Apex Tower." A wave of gasps and shocked murmurs rolled through the crowd. This was no longer a technical glitch. This was a spectacle. Reporters in the audience were already scribbling in their notebooks, their phones held up to record. "This is absurd," Marcus sputtered, his composure cracking. "This is a pathetic attempt by a clearly disturbed individual to disrupt this event." "Is it?" I countered, taking a few steps forward. "Then perhaps you can explain the video we all just saw. Or maybe you'd prefer to hear another recording." I nodded to Dave again. He hit another key. Marcus's own voice, the voice from the memo, suddenly boomed from the ballroom speakers. Crystal clear. Memo to self. Regarding the Apex design source, Chloe Vance has delivered the complete original files from her husband. A bit raw, but the core concept is brilliant. Pure genius. We'll need to scrub the originals and make sure her husband stays quiet. The recording ended. The silence that followed was deafening. It was absolute. It was the sound of a $200 million project imploding. It was the sound of two careers ending. It was the sound of the truth finally being heard. Chaos erupted. People were standing up, shouting questions. The reporters were swarming towards the stage like sharks that smelled blood. Marcus stood there, his face as white as a sheet, completely exposed. But it was Chloe I was watching. She didn't look at Marcus. She didn't look at the crowd. She looked at me. And in her eyes, I saw the full, devastating realization of what she had done, and what it had cost her. Then her legs seemed to give way. She crumpled to the floor of a stage in a heap of red silk and shame. Marcus, ever the survivor, grabbed her arm and tried to pull her up. "We're leaving," he hissed, his eyes darting around for an escape route. He dragged her towards a side exit, abandoning the podium. the project, and any semblance of dignity. They pushed their way through a throng of stunned onlookers and disappeared. The ballroom was in an uproar. People were yelling, pointing, talking on their phones. The news anchor who had introduced them was standing by the podium, his jaw hanging open. I stood in the middle of it all, my microphone still in my hand. My heart was still pounding. But the rage had subsided. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt empty. I had won. I had exposed them. I had burned their world to the ground. But my own was still in ashes. Dave came up to me and put a hand on my shoulder. "You did it, man," he said, his voice full of awe. "You actually did it." I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I dropped the microphone onto a nearby table. The sound of it clattering was lost in the noise. I turned and walked out of the ballroom through the same service entrance I had used to come in. I didn't want to talk to the reporters. I didn't want to answer any questions. I just wanted to go home. As I stepped out into the cool night air, the rain had started to fall. It washed over the city, cleaning the dirty streets. I tilted my face up to the sky and let the cold drops run down my cheeks. It felt like the city was weeping with me. The battle was over. But the war for my own soul was just beginning. My phone started buzzing in my pocket. It was a relentless, angry vibration. I pulled it out. The screen was filled with notifications. Dozens of missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. And a string of text messages. From Chloe. "How could you? You've ruined me. You've ruined everything." Then a message from Marcus. It was short and direct. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life. This isn't over. I will destroy you." I stared at the thread, the rain blurring the words on the screen. I wasn't scared. I wasn't angry. I just felt a profound weariness. I had torn down the corrupt structure they had built. But now I was standing in the rubble. And I had to figure out how to build something new. For me. For my son. I turned off my phone, slid it back into my pocket, and started the long walk home. The days that followed the unveiling were a blur of noise and silence. The noise came from the outside world. The story exploded. It was the lead item on the local news, a trending topic on social media, a scandalous headline in the city's business journals. Architectural dream becomes public nightmare. The blueprint for betrayal. My name and face were everywhere, alongside grainy screenshots from the parking garage video and unflattering photos of Marcus and Chloe fleeing the stage. My phone rang constantly with calls from reporters, from lawyers, from old colleagues I hadn't heard from in years. I ignored them all. I unplugged the landline. The world wanted a piece of my story, but I had nothing left to give. The silence was inside the house. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket. Chloe hadn't come home. Her car was gone. Her side of the closet was half empty. She had packed a bag in a hurry and disappeared. For 2 days, I had no idea where she was. I didn't try to find her. The house felt strangely peaceful without her presence, without the constant, humming tension that had defined our lives for the past few months. It was just me and Sam. I tried to keep things normal for him. We built elaborate Lego castles. We went to the park. We made pancakes for dinner. But he could feel the shift. He was quieter than usual. One evening, as I was tucking him into bed, he asked the question I had been dreading. "Is Mommy mad at us?" I sat on the edge of his bed, the faint glow of his dinosaur nightlight casting long shadows on the wall. How do you explain adultery and corporate espionage to a 6-year-old? How do you tell him that the foundation of his world has crumbled? "No, buddy," I said, stroking his hair. "Mommy's not mad. She's just working through some grown-up problems right now. She needed some space." "Is she coming back?" he asked, his small voice trembling. I looked into his wide, trusting eyes, and my heart broke. "I don't know, Sam," I answered honestly. "But I'm not going anywhere. It's you and me. We're a team. Always." He seemed to accept that. He hugged his stuffed bear, rolled over, and closed his eyes. I sat there in the dark for a long time, the silence of the house pressing in on me. The victory at the hotel felt hollow now. Exposing the truth hadn't fixed anything. It had only finalized the destruction. On the third day, Chloe called. Her voice was raspy, exhausted. "I need to get the rest of my things," she said, without any preamble. "Where are you?" I asked, my own voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Staying with a friend. I'll come by tomorrow afternoon. When Sam's at school." She paused. "Leo, we need to talk." There's nothing to talk about. Chloe, I said. You made your choice. You made it a long time ago. You don't understand, she started, her voice cracking. Oh, I understand perfectly. I cut her off. I understand the stolen designs. The lies. Marcus. I understand the slab. I understand everything. The only thing I don't understand is how you thought you would get away with it. There was a sob on the other end of the line. It was a raw, broken sound. But I felt nothing. No pity. No sympathy. The part of me that had once loved her was gone, burned away in the fire of her betrayal. I'll see you tomorrow, I said, and hung up. The next afternoon, she came. She looked smaller, diminished. The power suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a simple sweater. Her face was pale and puffy, her eyes red-rimmed. She moved through the house like a ghost, silently packing her belongings into cardboard boxes. I stayed in my studio, the doorway a silent boundary between our separate worlds. When she was finished, she stood in the hallway, surrounded by the boxed-up pieces of her life. The board suspended both of us, pending a full investigation. She said, her voice barely a whisper. The investors pulled out. The project is dead. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. Are you happy now? Leo, you've destroyed everything. I didn't destroy anything. Chloe, I said, my voice cold and steady. I just turned on the lights. You and Marcus built this thing on a rotten foundation. It was always going to collapse. I loved you, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. A part of me still does. No, I said, shaking my head. You loved the idea of me. The quiet, supportive husband who would stay in the background while you chased your ambition. But you didn't love me enough to be honest. You didn't respect me enough not to steal from me. And you didn't love your son enough not to hurt him for the sake of your career. Every word was a nail in the coffin of our marriage. She flinched, as if I had struck her. She knew it was the truth. There was nothing left to say. She picked up a box, her shoulders slumped in defeat, and walked out the door. I watched through the window as she loaded her life into the trunk of her car and drove away. The house was quiet again. But this time, it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of finality. The real fight, however, was just beginning. Marcus Thorne was not a man who accepted defeat. A week later, a courier delivered a thick envelope to my door. It was from a high-powered law firm. Inside was a cease and desist letter, followed by a notice of intent to sue me for defamation, slander, and corporate sabotage. They were demanding an exorbitant amount in damages. It was a declaration of war, a legal blitzkrieg designed to intimidate and bankrupt me. I took the documents to a lawyer my friend Dave had recommended. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Maria Flores. She read through the papers, her expression unreadable. This is a classic bully tactic, she said, tossing the thick stack of papers onto her desk. They're trying to scare you into silence. They're betting you don't have the resources or the stomach to fight back. Can they win? I asked, the weight of the legal thread settling in my chest. Based on the evidence you've shown me? Maria smiled. A thin, confident smile. Not a chance. In fact, we're going to hit them back. And we're going to hit them hard. She explained the strategy. We would file a countersuit for copyright infringement, intellectual property theft, and conspiracy. But we would go further. We would file a formal ethics complaint with the American Institute of Architects, the national governing body. A lawsuit is about money, Maria explained. An ethics violation can cost them their licenses, their careers. For an architect, that's a death sentence. That's where we apply the real pressure. The legal battle became a slow, grinding war of attrition. There were depositions, motions, endless paperwork. Marcus's lawyers tried every trick in the book to drag out the process, to bury us in legal jargon and procedural delays. It was exhausting. It was expensive. My savings started to dwindle. There were nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if Chloe was right, if they would just bury me. During this time, I found an unexpected source of strength. The story, which had been a curse, slowly started to become a shield. Other architects, designers, and creatives who had been burned by powerful figures in the industry started reaching out to me. They sent emails and messages, sharing their own stories of stolen ideas and corporate bullying. A grassroots online community began to form around my case. A small army of supporters who saw my fight as their own. They started a legal defense fund, donating small amounts, $5 or $10 at a time. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. It was enough to know I wasn't alone. One evening, I was sitting in my studio, going over a stack of legal documents, when Sam came in. He was holding one of my old sketchbooks. He opened it to a drawing I had made years ago, a design for a community center, with a rooftop garden and a playground. "Daddy," he asked, "are you going to build this one day?" I looked at the drawing, at the hopeful, clean lines of a building meant to bring people together. It felt like it was from another lifetime. The last few months had been about tearing things down. I had become so focused on the fight, on the betrayal, that I had forgotten why I started drawing in the first place. I had forgotten the joy of creating. I looked at my son, his face full of innocent hope, and I realized this fight wasn't just about punishing Marcus and Chloe. It was about protecting my right to be the man I was supposed to be. The man who builds things. The man his son could be proud of. "Yeah, buddy," I said, a real smile touching my lips for the first time in a long time. "Yeah, I think I will." The turning point came during Marcus's deposition. We were in a sterile conference room, just like the one in my memory. But this time, I had Maria by my side. Marcus was arrogant, dismissive, lying with a practiced ease. But Maria was relentless. She patiently walked him through a timeline of events, backing him into a corner with emails, phone records, and financial statements that Dave had managed to uncover. The final piece was the audio memo. Maria had the original file, with the untampered metadata proving it came from Marcus's own device. She played it for him, as his own voice filled the silent room. His mask of confident superiority finally crumbled. He sat there, his face pale, his knuckles white as he gripped the arms of his chair. He was trapped in his own words. He was finished. The aftermath of the deposition was swift and brutal. Marcus Thorne, a man who had built his empire on an image of untouchable brilliance, had been publicly and legally dismantled. Faced with the irrefutable evidence of the audio recording, his lawyers scrambled to arrange a settlement, but it was too late. The Ethics Committee of the American Institute of Architects, armed with the same evidence, moved forward with their own hearing. It was no longer just a civil matter. It was a question of professional life and death. Marcus, in a final act of desperation, tried one last, thuggish maneuver. He must have known the official channels were close to him. He was a cornered animal, and cornered animals are always the most dangerous. The call came on a Tuesday night. It was a blocked number. I almost didn't answer, but some instinct told me I should. "Leo Vance," a gravelly voice said. It wasn't Marcus. It was someone trying to sound tough. "Who is this?" I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. "A friend of Marcus Thorne's," the voice said. "He wants to talk. Man to man. No liars. He has a proposal that will make all this go away. An old construction site off the I-55. Tomorrow. Sunset. Come alone." The line went dead. My blood ran cold. It was a scene from a bad movie. A threat so cliché it was almost laughable. But the menace behind it was real. They weren't trying to win in court anymore. They were trying to win in the alley. I immediately called Dave. "Don't go, Leo," he pleaded. "This is insane. They could kill you." "They're not going to kill me," I said, my mind racing. A cold clarity settling over me. "They're trying to intimidate me, to threaten me or bribe me into dropping the IA complaint before the hearing. That's the only card they have left to play." But I wasn't going to be intimidated, and I certainly wasn't going to be stupid. I called Maria, and she called the police. We explained the situation, the history of the case, the implied threat. They were skeptical at first, but the evidence file I had on Marcus was thick. They agreed to get involved. The next evening, as the sun began to dip below the Chicago skyline, casting long, orange shadows, I drove to the designated location. It was a half-finished commercial development, a skeleton of steel beams and concrete floors surrounded by a chain-link fence. It was desolate, forgotten, the perfect place for a threat. But I wasn't alone. I was wearing a wire. 2 unmarked police cars were parked a quarter-mile down the road, listening to every word. Dave wasn't one of them, monitoring the feed, his technical skills now in service of the law. I had left Sam with a trusted neighbor, telling him I had a late work meeting. The light tasted bitter, but it was necessary. I walked through a gap in the fence, my footsteps crunching on gravel. The air smelled of damp concrete and rust. I saw him standing in the center of the ground floor, a silhouette against the dying light. Marcus Thorne. He was alone. He looked different without his expensive suit and his entourage. He looked smaller, haggard. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, desperate anger. "You came," he said, his voice echoing in the empty structure. "You wanted to talk." I replied, keeping my distance. I kept my hands visible, my posture non-threatening. "I was just there to listen. I'm going to make this simple for you, Vance," he said, taking a step closer. "You're going to drop the ethics complaint. You're going to release a public statement saying there was a misunderstanding. In return, I will give you a check for $5 million, and you and your kid can disappear and live a nice, quiet life." $5 million. The price of my silence. The price of my integrity. A year ago, that amount of money would have been life-changing. Now, it just felt insulting. It was never about the money. "Marcus," I said, my voice calm. His face twisted into a sneer. "Oh, don't give me that noble artist crap. Everything is about money. You just weren't smart enough to get yours." Chloe was. She saw the bigger picture. "She saw you," I corrected him. "And she made a choice. And so did you. You chose to steal, to lie, and to cheat. Now you have to live with that choice." His composure finally snapped. He lunged forward, his face contorted with rage. "You think you've won? You think this is over?" he yelled, his voice cracking. "I will drag your name through the mud for the rest of your life. I will bury you in appeals. You will never work in this city again. I will take everything from you." He was right in my face now, spitting with fury. But I didn't flinch. I just stood my ground. "You can't take anything from me, Marcus," I said quietly, "because I'm not building with your materials anymore. My foundation is solid." Just as he raised a hand, as if to strike me, the sound of sirens cut through the evening air. The wail grew louder, closer. Red and blue lights flashed against the concrete pillars, painting the scene in frantic, strobing colors. Marcus froze, his hand hovering in the air. He looked past me, his eyes wide with disbelief and panic as the police cars sped onto the site, tires screeching on the gravel. He turned back to me, his face a mask of pure hatred. "You set me up. You set yourself up," I replied. "You thought I was predictable. You were wrong." The police officers swarmed him, weapons drawn. They pushed him against a concrete pillar, his angry, impotent shouts echoing through the abandoned building as they cuffed his hands behind his back. Attempted bribery, coercion, making threats more charges to add to the list. It was a pathetic, desperate end to a man who once seemed to rule the world. I walked away as they read him his rights. I didn't look back. I got in my car and drove, the adrenaline slowly draining away, leaving behind a profound exhaustion. But it was a clean kind of tired. It was the feeling of a long, hard job finally being finished. The IA hearing was a formality. Marcus was stripped of his license to practice architecture, a permanent and public disgrace. The board's ruling was scathing, a detailed condemnation of his unethical and predatory behavior. Chloe, as a co-conspirator, had her license suspended for 5 years, with a criminal record now attached to her name. Her career in the high-stakes world she so desperately wanted to join was effectively over. The Apex Tower, my evergreen, was officially declared my intellectual property. The name, however, was tainted forever. I let it die with them. The civil suit settled quickly after that. They had no leverage left. I didn't take the $5 million Marcus had offered. On Maria's advice, I accepted a smaller, but still substantial, settlement. But it came with a condition. I didn't want their blood money. Instead, I had them sign a legally binding agreement to finance a new project. A project of my choosing. A year later, the dust had settled. Life had found a new, quieter rhythm. I used the settlement money to buy a small, old brick building in a neighborhood that needed some love. I opened my own firm. A small, 2-person operation. Me, and a bright young intern from the local university. I named it Vance Foundations. It was a promise to myself to always build on solid ground. My first project was a one funded by Marcus Thorne's downfall. It was a pro bono community arts center. The building I had sketched in my notebook all those years ago. The one Sam had asked about. The final scene isn't in a courtroom or a cold conference room. It's on a sunny Saturday afternoon. I'm standing on a scaffold, a paintbrush in my hand, helping a group of neighborhood volunteers paint a large, colorful mural on the side of the newly completed community center. The sound of children's laughter rings out from the playground we built next to it. Sam is down there, swinging on the monkey bars, his face alight with pure joy. The building isn't a skyscraper. It won't change the Chicago skyline. It won't win any prestigious awards or be featured in glossy magazines. But it's real. It's honest. It's full of life. It's built on a foundation of integrity. A foundation that no one can ever take away from me. Sam sees me watching him and waves. A huge, gap-toothed grin on his face. I wave back, my heart swelling with a kind of quiet, peaceful happiness I haven't felt in years. I look at the building, at the community it's already starting to create, at the bright future taking shape from the rubble of a painful past. They took my blueprint, but they couldn't take my foundation. If you're fighting your own battle, remember this: protect what you build, stand by your truth, and never be afraid to draw a new plan. Your real masterpiece isn't the thing you design. It's the life you build. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I was finally building my own. The community center became my sanctuary. Each new coat of paint on the walls, every window installed, felt like an act of healing. It was a tangible creation, a direct contrast to the destructive, hollow battles I had been fighting. The smell of sawdust and fresh paint replaced the sterile scent of law offices and conference rooms. The sound of hammers and children's laughter drowned out the memory of whispered conspiracies and angry shouts. Chloe reached out a few months after her sentencing, not with a call, but with a letter. It was written on plain notebook paper, the kind you buy at a drugstore. Her handwriting, once so confident and precise, was shaky. It was a long, rambling letter, full of remorse, regret, and self-pity. She wrote about her ambition, how it had become a hunger that consumed everything else at her judgment, her morals, her love for me and for Sam. She wrote about Marcus, how he had preyed on that hunger, feeding it, promising her a world she thought she wanted. She didn't ask for forgiveness, not directly, but she asked about Sam. She asked if he was okay. She asked if he ever asked about her. She enclosed a small, clumsy drawing of a cartoon dog, the kind she used to draw for him before her work consumed her. I read the letter and felt a profound sadness, but not for the loss of our marriage. I felt sad for the woman she had become, and the woman she could have been. The anger was gone, replaced by a quiet, settled emptiness. She had made her choices, and now she was living in the house she had built for herself. A house of regret. I wrote back a short, simple reply. I told her Sam was happy and healthy, that he was thriving in school and loved the new community center. I told her that I hoped she found a way to heal and to rebuild her own life on a better foundation. And I enclosed a recent school picture of Sam, smiling his gap-toothed grin. It felt like the right thing to do. An act of closure. A final, clean break. My life settled into a new, comfortable routine. Mornings were for Sam pancakes, school drop-offs, conversations about superheroes and dinosaurs. Days were for my work. I took on small, meaningful projects: a sustainable renovation for a local library, a universally accessible playground for a children's hospital. My firm wasn't making millions, but it was making a difference. We were building things that mattered. The online community that had supported me during the lawsuit didn't just fade away. It evolved. It became a platform, a place for other creatives to share stories, seek advice, and find solidarity. I started a weekly blog, writing about ethical design, about the challenges of staying true to your vision in a world that often rewards compromise. The channel, the price we pay, became a small beacon for others navigating their own betrayals. One evening, about a year after the community center opened, I was locking up my office. Sam was with me, finishing his homework at my old drafting table. My phone buzzed. It was an email with an unfamiliar subject line and apology. I opened it. It was from a young architect who had just left Thorne and Associates. He wrote that he had been on the junior team for the Apex Tower. He told me that many of them had suspected the design's origins were questionable, but they were too young, too intimidated to speak up. He wrote that what I had done standing up to Marcus, fighting for my work, had sent a shockwave through the junior ranks of the industry in Chicago. It had started conversations. It had empowered people. He was writing to thank me and to apologize for his silence. I read the email and felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with money or victory. It was the feeling of connection, the knowledge that my painful, personal battle had, in some small way, help to make things better for someone else. I looked over at Sam. He had fallen asleep, his head resting on his math textbook, his breathing soft and even. The late afternoon sun streamed through the large studio window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The room was quiet, peaceful. It was filled with my drawings, my son, and my future. I walked over and gently shook him awake. "Come on, buddy," I whispered. "Let's go home." He stirred, rubbing his eyes. "Okay, Daddy." We walked out of the office and into the cool evening air. The streetlights were just beginning to flicker on, casting a warm, golden glow. The city hummed around us, a gentle, familiar rhythm. We weren't living in a glass tower on the lakefront. We were living in a small, comfortable house in a neighborhood with big trees and friendly faces. A house I had made a home again. As we walked, Sam slipped his small hand into mine. It was a simple, trusting gesture, and in that moment, I understood everything. The true measure of a man isn't the height of the buildings he designs, but the strength of the hands he holds. It's not about the skyline you change, but the world you create for the people you love. My story started with a slap, with the sound of a family breaking apart, but it ends here, on a quiet street, with the gentle squeeze of my son's hand in mine. The price of betrayal was devastatingly high, but the value of integrity, I learned, is priceless. It's the one thing you can build that no one can ever tear down. For every one of you listening, for every person who has ever had their heart broken or their dream stolen, know this: the night is always darkest just before the dawn. Hold on to what is true, defend what is yours, and keep building, because your foundation is worth fighting for.